welcome to today's lesson on mixed numbers and improper fraction, and this is looking at converting mixed numbers into improper fractions. So a little refresh to start with. How would you calculate these? And you're writing your answer as a mixed number. So just to help you out, if you're absolutely struggling to understand what that question's saying, 1 add 2/3 is 1 2/3. And that answer is as a mixed number. The reason it's called a mixed number is because it's made up of an integer and a fraction. Okay, press pause now, off you go, complete the next two, and when you finish, press play and we can look at if you've got those correct. So well done, you should have completed those other two now, and 2 plus 1/5 is 2 1/5, and 3/4 add 4 is 4 3/4. I tried to trick you out by writing that one the other way round, but we can do a fraction add an integer value, or we can do an integer value add a fraction. Either way a calculation can be written, and it's for us to then make sure that we write it in the correct format. Things to be aware of, make sure that this 2 is not creeping under this fraction sign. Notice I've got a definite gap there. It could even be said that it might be slightly better if I'd written it as a big 2 and then a 1/5, or that I'd written a 2 and then the 1/5 is like that. But it's really important that this number here doesn't creep into the fraction in any way. Okay, hopefully you got those right. If not, just check through your understanding and we can move on. So, what's an improper fraction? Okay, I want you to pause. I want you to think about that. And then we're going to write a definition in our books of what an improper fraction is. So, what is an improper fraction? An improper fraction is a fraction that is greater than 1. It also can be seen as having a numerator which is higher or larger than the denominator. Now, so there are our definitions. A fraction that's greater than 1 having a numerator which is higher than the denominator, and examples could be 9/7. So you'll notice that fraction is more than 1 because 7/7 makes a whole, and therefore 9/7 is greater than 1. And also you'll notice that the numerator is larger than the denominator. And we can have 11/5, and again the numerator is greater than the denominator, and we can see that 5/5 would make 1 whole, 10/5 would make 2 wholes, so this is actually more than 2 wholes. So again, it is an improper fraction. Are you able to write me an improper fraction down on your page? What I'd like you to do now is make sure you've written this title here, and to write those definitions if you haven't already underneath, and then to see if you could write a couple of improper fractions out before moving on to the next slide. So now what we're going to do is actually look at writing our mixed number, which here is 1 1/3, as an improper fraction. So 1 1/3 is actually the same as 1 add 1/3. So we can separate the integer value from the fraction value and write it as a summation. So 1 1/3 is equal to 1 add 1/3. Now, therefore, if I want to think about the number 1 in thirds, I'm going to draw my bar out, and that's my bar, which is 1, and I'm going to divide it into thirds. So that's my 1 divided into thirds, and I also have another 1/3. So this 1 here is represented by this diagram here, and this 1/3 here is represented by this part of a bar here. So in total, how many thirds have I got? Well, I have 3 bars here, 3 parts to my bar here, so that's 3 thirds, and then I have another one, so I can write that in total I have 4 thirds. So 1 1/3 equals 4 thirds. This here is my mixed number, and this here is my improper fraction. So let's try another. Make sure though, before we move on, you've copied that into your books. Listen to it again if you need to, and then we'll try another example. Okay, so let's have a go at the next one, and this one we're going to look at is going to be 2 2/5. So we're writing 2 2/5 as an improper fraction, because remember at the moment 2 2/5 is a mixed number. So to help us think this through, that's the same as 2, which is the integer, add 2/5, which is our fraction. So if we think about 2, I would draw out 2 bars. And I want to divide those into fifths. And the reason I know it's fifths is that's my denominator here. So this denominator is really informative in helping us to understand how to divide our bars. So we are going to divide these into fifths. So that this here is one whole and this is another whole, and then I've got my 2/5, so I'm going to draw out a part of a bar. So I now have written or represented with a diagram 2 2/5, and I've represented them all as fifths. So now I can write that 2 2/5 is equal to 1 2 3 4 5, then another 5, so that would be 10, plus another 2, which would make 12/5. Have a look, see where I get those 12/5 from. Check that you understand. Make sure you copy that down into your books so that you can complete that calculation before we move on to the next example. I thought we'd now do an actual calculation using our knowledge. So here, this would be 2 subtract 3/4. So 2 subtract 3/4. My answer I could work out just using my understanding of bars, But I'm going to draw it out and then I'm going to write my answer as an improper fraction. So let me start with drawing a bar out, and I'm going to draw one bar out, that's 1, and I'm going to draw another bar out, which is 2. I'm taking away 3/4, so I need to divide my bars into quarters. So I now have my 2 wholes divided into quarters. And I'm taking away 3/4. So I'm taking away, that would be taking away 1/4. That would be taking away another quarter. So how many of my quarters have I taken away now? I've taken away 2/4. This is me taking away 3/4. So I'm crossing out the quarters of my bar to represent me taking it away. So this diagram now represents 2 wholes take away 3/4. So what am I left with? Well, my answer for this is 2 subtract 3/4 is equal to all of that bar and this. So how many quarters are remaining? Can you work that out before I write the answer down? You should have got the answer 5/4. And it also could be written, so that's my answer, as a improper fraction. Remember, my numerator is larger than my denominator, and it's an improper fraction because it's more than 1 whole. I could write this answer as a mixed number if I was asked as well, because that would be 1 1/4. I mean, it's important that when we look at questions that we actually understand and clearly understand what the person who wrote the question is asking me to write my answer as. Are they asking me to write my answer as an improper fraction, or are they asking me to write it as a mixed number? Now, we're going to move on for some questions for you to do. So here we go. Here's some questions for you to have a go at. I'd like you to do the questions that I've put in a box to start with. Once you've completed those, press play again, check they're right before you move on to the last questions. Okay, press pause, and if you need any help, remember to replay the video as it will help you. Off you go. Okay, looking at our answers now for the questions in the red box. The first one would be 9/4. Now, if you haven't got that, can I ask you to stop now, go back, review the video, try and correct it before you then go on and we mark the next 3. So press pause now. Try and understand why we got 9/4. Look back at the video, do a correction, then review these 3 questions, and then come back and mark them. So press pause now if you need to. Okay, I'm assuming the rest of you listening to me now, you're all good. So here, this is 3/5. This one here, and I'm just actually going to go back to 3/5. You'll notice that's not an improper fraction because it's a fraction that's less than 1. You'll notice the numerator is less than the denominator, so that would be a proper fraction. And then the third one is 11/4, and the last is 6/5. I'm just going to write that slightly better because you really shouldn't do slopey lines because they do cause problems later in maths, particularly when you're doing A-level, which I hope I will find you doing in the future. And I'm not going to today go through the second section here. Most of the last 3 questions here are something that would only be found on a higher GCSE paper. They're a really good challenge, but it's not what we're focusing on in this lesson today. So if you've got these right, well done. If you haven't got these quite correct, can I ask you to go back, review them, correct them, look back at the video, get them sorted out, and then we need to move on and do some practice work.